Okay, so good morning students. So this is video 4. Here we will be studying about spinal cord. Okay, we will see what is spinal cord. So spinal cord is a part of central nervous system, already we have seen with the brain, which is present in the vertebral canal. So this is seen in the vertebral canal. The upper end of the spinal cord commences at the level of foramen magnum. So you will see that it is found in the vertebral canal. Then the upper end of the spinal canal cord, it commences at the level of foramen magnum. So in front of the foramen magnum only you have this medulla oblongata. Remember we studied in that. So this is a part of central nervous system. Where it is present in the vertebral column. You know where is the vertebral column, right? In the center. And then the upper end of the spinal cord commences at the level of foramen magnum. So we have seen from medulla oblongata only it is coming, right? The spinal cord is forming. So upper end of the spinal column, it is actually beginning at the level of foramen magnum, because in front of that only we have medulla oblongata. The upper end is continuous above with medulla oblongata. So that upper end only is continuing into the spinal cord. Okay. The lower end lies at the level of first lumbar vertebrae. So for this you should study the vertebral column bones. So it ends up, where is the spinal cord ending? At the lumbar first vertebrae, L1. In L1 the spinal cord is ending. So it does not fill the lower part of the vertebral canal. So it does not go to the lower part. In lumbar 1 itself the spinal cord is ending and it is starting from the medulla oblongata. The lower end of the spinal cord, it terminates in a bunch of nerves. Okay, so we see that the lower end of the spinal cord, it terminates, means it ends. It ends in a bunch of nerves resembling the tail of a horse called as cauda equina. Okay, so the lower end, if you see, it is actually ending as a bunch of nerves. It will end like, bunch of nerves. Okay, so it will be almost like a tail. Okay, tail of a horse when you see. Okay, so you see back, right, like a tail. Okay, the hair. Okay, like that, called as cauda equina. So at the end of the spinal cord, it ends like a bunch of nerves which almost resembles, means looks like, okay, looks like tail of an horse, tail of the horse, of a horse. So that is called as cauda equina. The longest of these nerves is called as phylum terminale, which ends at the coccyx. Okay, so the longest of these nerves, when you see these nerves, which is the longest one, it is called as the phylum termina, which ends at the coccyx. Coccyx is the last bone of the vertebral column. Okay, so you'll see that longest of these, now one of the nerve will just run to the coccyx, and that is called as phylum terminale. Termination means end. Okay, so terminale. Okay, so this is about the spinal cord. Okay, so spinal cord is a part of the nervous system and it is present where? In the vertebral column. So the upper end of the spinal cord is actually commencing at the level of foramen magnum, and the upper end is continuous of the medulla oblongata, and it ends, it is the lower end ends at L1, lumbar 1 of the vertebral column, and it does not extend. Okay, so at the end it looks like a horse tail or bunch of nerves. So that is called as cauda equina, and the longest of these nerves, it runs into the coccyx, which is called as phylum terminale. So for this lumbar coccyx and all, you should learn the vertebral bones. Okay, just remember that. Next, enlargement. If you see, the spinal cord shows two enlargement in its course. Okay, they are cervical and lumbar enlargement. They are called as cervical and lumbar enlargement. So nerves to the arms and legs arise from these enlargement. Nerves to the arms and legs. Okay, when you see, it is arising from these enlargement. All the nerves that is provided to the arms and legs. Okay, it is coming from these nerves, from these enlargement. So it has an enlargement, means swelling like. Okay, you will see a swelling. Okay, spinal cord shows two enlargement on the both side. If you see, it is like this. Okay, it is an enlargement in its course. They are cervical, so that are called as cervical and lumbar enlargement. So these nerves to the arms and legs are coming from these enlargement. Okay, next you have the structure. Okay, the structure. So when you say the structure, we will study about the whole of the structure. in this video. Okay, next video we will see about the meninges, that is the covering of the brain. Okay, so when we say structure, a cross section means which is cut. Okay, heart when it is there, okay, when you cut it you will see the cross section. And cross section, how do we view? We view it under the microscope, right? So cross section of the spinal cord shows the following structure. Okay, when you cut it, you can see in the diagram. I will be posting this diagram. Please keep the diagram and study. So white matter on the surface and grey matter in the interior. We know that white matter is the outer and grey matter is the inner part. So you can see both. Okay, so in the brain when you see, you will see that white matter is in the inside and grey matter is the outside. In the spinal cord it is the opposite. Okay, please make correction. Okay, so white matter will be found on the surface and grey matter in the inside. Okay, interior, reverse of what we see in the brain. Okay, then grey matter will be H shaped. You can see in the diagram. Okay, it will be like a H shaped and it divides the white matter into anterior, posterior and lateral columns. It is the grey matter which is in H shape. It divides the white matter into anterior. Okay, anterior is front, posterior is back. Okay, lateral is the side. So this H is dividing the white matter into anterior, posterior, lateral columns. Then you have anterior fissure. Okay, so this anterior fissure, it separates the anterior columns of each side. So anterior fissure, it separates the anterior columns of each side. Okay, anterior fissure is there. Okay, that is the anterior part. It separates the anterior column of the each side. And then H-shaped grey matters contains anterior and posterior horns. You can see in the diagram. Okay, it has got like horn. Okay, horn means usually on the cow you see, right, horns. So that shaped. Okay, it contains two, that is anterior, front part and lower back part. Okay, anterior means front, posterior means back. So H-shaped grey matter contains anterior and posterior horns. The anterior horn cells are concerned with motor function. So all these anterior horn cells are concerned with motor functions. Then anterior root of spinal nerves arise from the anterior horn. Anterior root of spinal nerves arise from the anterior horn. Posterior horn cells are sensory in function. Posterior horn cells are sensory in function. The posterior root of spinal nerves enter the spinal cord through the posterior horns. The posterior horn cells are sensory in function, anterior are motor in function, and we see that the posterior root of spinal nerves enter the spinal cord through the posterior horns, and anterior horns, they arise from the anterior horn, and anterior root of spinal nerves, that is the anterior part of the spinal nerves, are actually coming from the anterior horn, and here posterior, that is the lower part, back side of the root of the spinal nerves, they are entering into the spinal cord through the posterior horns. Next you have the posterior root contains a ganglion called as dorsal ganglion. So posterior side, that is the back side of the spinal cord, there is a ganglion which is called as dorsal ganglion. A minute canal, a minute means small, a small canal means there is a space, okay, hollow space, like a tube when you take, it is like a canal, right? So when you have a big pipe, what is it? The hollow space is called as canal, where the water can flow, or you can keep something inside. Okay, a minute canal is present in the center of the spinal cord. So you will see a small hole in the center of the spinal cord which is called as central canal. It contains cerebrospinal fluid and it is continuous above with the fourth ventricle. So in that canal you have CSF, that is cerebrospinal fluid, a fluid which is called as cerebrospinal fluid, and it is continuous and is above with the fourth ventricle. So this is about the spinal cord. We have seen the structure and what the spinal cord is. Okay, so when we say spinal cord, we have seen the position, the enlargement and the structure. Structure I will summarize once again. Okay, so when we say here, we see that when cross section, when it is cut, we see that there is a white matter and there is a grey matter. So white matter is found on the surface, that is the outside, and grey matter is found inside. which is the reverse or opposite of the brain. Okay, in the brain it is just opposite. And then we see that this grey matter is H-shaped. This H-shaped grey matter divides the white matter anteriorly, posteriorly and laterally. That's what we have seen, right? It divides in them into anterior, posterior and lateral columns. Next we have seen anterior fissure. Okay, so there is a fissure, anterior fissure. It separates the anterior columns of each side. So there is anterior fissure which separates the columns of each side, anterior columns of each side. Then we have seen that this H-shaped grey matter contains two horns like structure, which is called as anterior and posterior horn. Okay, so now we will see what are the speciality of these horn. Anterior horn cells, they are concerned with motor function. Posterior with sensory in function. You know what is motor? Related to movements. Sensory related to touch, smell. Okay, all these, temperature, all these comes under sensory. And anterior root, that is the upper part of the spinal nerves, they arise from the anterior horn. So from the anterior horn only you are having the anterior part of the spinal cord coming. Then you have posterior root of the spinal nerves. These enter the spinal cord through the posterior horns. Okay, then posterior root, it also contains about ganglion, which is called as dorsal ganglion, and there is a minute canal, okay, opening, okay, which is seen at the center of the spinal cord, which is called as central canal. And what does it have? It has cerebrospinal fluid, CSF, and then it is continuous above with the fourth ventricle. So all these ventricles till the fourth ventricle, the CSF will be flowing in this canal. Okay, so this is about the spinal cord. I hope you understood. I will be posting the notes, you know, so make sure that already if I have posted, you write. Otherwise, if I posted with the notes, make sure you write it and keep it, okay, so that you will also understand in detail what it is. Okay.